Welcome to the TK Show with the Athletic Bay Area's Editor-in-Chief, Tim Kawakami.
Everybody, Tim Kawakami here, TK Show coming to you, recorded from the Courtyard Marriott downtown Oakland, our little place. So if you hear that sweet background music, you'll know that's the Courtyard Marriott music going strong. But ignore that all if you can, because as my special guest today, my friend, someone whose voice you hear constantly on ESPN's Big Ten basketball coverage. I hear he's the voice of Purdue basketball these days now. The one, the only, the Giants play-by-play announcer, David Flemming. Dave, how you doing today?
I thought I recognized that music because when I go to West Lafayette, Indiana, and probably most other spots in the Big Ten, I stay at Courtyard Marriott, so I think they've got it on a loop across the country.
Yeah, the Courtyard Marriott, Iowa City, I'm sure, is really rocking right now, and the Bloomington Courtyard Marriott. You probably just give us a little sense of each one, how they're different, how they're all unique.
Yeah, where they put the coffee in the lobby changes from hotel to hotel. That's about it.
Strangely, well, we'll get your feelings about the acoustic dimensions of all these arenas in the Big Ten. I'm sure people are dying to hear that. But first, let's talk a little Giants. We went into it, maybe one of the most important off seasons in recent Giants history. Clearly, at a pivotal moment for the franchise, coming after a 97-loss season. How did you think Giancarlo Stanton was a possibility, and where do you see them after that doesn't happen and they kind of go with the Evan Longoria, Andrew McCutchen, potentially another player? How do you think this offseason has worked for them?
Well, that is a good question. I think the Stanton thing, all of us, I guess, underestimated what the power of at least I'll speak for myself, I underestimated the power of the no-trade clause and his desire to really steer the whole process. I figured that he was going to be a little more flexible or, a little more open to a variety of choices, and as it turned out, that just wasn't the case. He wanted to go to one or two places, and that was it. And that's totally within his rights. I have no problem with him using those rights. I do think that the Marlins themselves didn't do Stanton, or the Giants especially, any favors. I think the Marlins tried to basically bluff and say, look, we made a deal with the Giants, we made a deal with the Cardinals, you can choose, otherwise we're keeping you. And Stanton said, I don't believe you, you're not keeping me. And I don't want to go to one of those two teams. And the Marlins immediately folded and said, "You're right. We weren't going to keep you." And I think, the Marlins, if the Marlins had been a little stronger in their negotiating with him, or a little more willing to actually keep him around, I think he might have ended up here. If the choice truly had been stay there with a team that's being dismantled or come here, he would have come here. But he knew that wasn't the choice, and he used that power. So that's the first part of your question. Was it realistic? I think under different negotiating circumstances, it probably was realistic. The Marlins just didn't handle it very well. Part two is, okay, you didn't get him. Well, how did you adjust? I think the Giants have adjusted reasonably well. I talked to a smart baseball person that I really trust in the fall, and it wasn't me necessarily asking. It was more just we were having a conversation, and this person said to me, I don't really think the Giants are in a position to rebuild. And it wasn't like, because you hear this phrase tossed around of they just feel like they can't rebuild. That is misleading and wrong to me. They could rebuild, but this person's point was when you've committed this much payroll, not just for one more year, but for 3 or 4 more years to players who probably because of the contracts don't have a ton of value, what are you going to do? You're not cutting your whole team. That defeats the purpose of sort of hoarding money and spending it in different ways. They're locked into this team, so how can you best adjust? And I think all things considered, they've done a pretty good job this offseason within the parameters they had.
Do you think this kind of took them by surprise, though, that they got into a spot where there really isn't another, they can't hit the reload button? That they just thought these guys were going to be good at least for 2-3 more years. Do you think
Brian Sabian, Bobby Evans, Larry Baer feel a little stuck right now with this roster? I think they very much have been taken by surprise, and frankly, I don't blame them. The game has changed so dramatically in a span, really, I think you could make an argument that the game has dramatically changed in 24 months, and that's fast. The NBA changes and has changed a lot with three-point shooting and the types of players out on the court, but to me, that has happened over 5-10 years, maybe even more, going back to Steve Nash and some of those Don Nelson concepts that now are much more prevalent. Baseball, the change happens so fast. You went from an era where the Giants were championship built without the home run ball to now the home run being such an essential part of the sport. And whether it's baseball changing, whether it's this incredible data that has led to progressions in launch angle and the way swings are being taught, whether it's a combination of those things, I'm not expert enough to know, but it is a fact, it is a reality that the home run has changed just so dramatically in the last 2 years, and this Giants roster was totally ill-equipped to handle that, and I don't blame, it's hard for me to blame the Giants' decision makers for being caught off guard, because it did happen so fast. But once that change has come into the game, the Giants' roster just was not equipped to win at the level they thought it was. And to me, that's the number one issue. And I think you could also argue that in that same time period, we have had a very fast and dramatic change in the way teams are using starting pitching. And we saw it in the playoffs most dramatically, but it's happened in the regular season too. And the Giants are kind of the one team, one of maybe a handful of teams, that pumped a ton of money into the traditional solid starting five, get tons of innings out of those starters. And that model right now is showing some vulnerability, and that's a big question for this team, I think, going forward.
So what do you think, they're going to play 2018 their way, or you just can't say hit more home runs, right? So how are they going to play this?
I think it's the huge question looming over this team, that you can't just snap your fingers and say hit more and give up fewer. And it's both sides of the equation, because it's not just the Giants haven't kept up with everybody else, literally every other franchise in the sports, home run totals skyrocketing, and the Giants staying right the exact same that it has been like the last 3, 4, 5 years. That's part of it, but also the Giants at this level used to have a positive home run differential. They would hit more than they gave up. They used their ballpark to their advantage, and we're not seeing that in the same way. The Giants, even their best pitchers, are giving up more home runs, and even their best pitchers are giving up more home runs at AT&T Park, and that is a complicated thing. Like, how do you combat that? And part of it this year will be, okay, you added McCutchen, you added Longoria. That's home run power in two spots you were getting none last year. And then part of it will be, can Cueto be more like himself? Can Bumgarner be healthy for the full year? And you give up fewer on your end. And I think both those things are realistic. Can you bridge the full gap? I don't know. That's the big question. But I think they've made more progress than you might think on the surface with just those two moves and hopefully getting Bumgarner and Cueto back to their level.
You and I have talked about this, and you're like the only person who's really raised this. I've seen it maybe some other places. You're not way ahead of the curve, but you certainly brought it up to me, and it hit something for me, how the Giants don't really draft for dynamic talents. They go for the solid guys, and we've seen them. They fit very well right into championship-level teams, Joe Panik and Brandon Crawford. And you see the Buster Posey model clearly. But they don't have the dynamic talents that maybe are a little risky, but they really pay off. Or that you can throw them into a trade like the Yankees have and to get big-time talent in the return. Do you think the Giants, one, recognize this, and two, might be thinking about trying to change the way they go into the draft system and certainly the developing system?
100%. I think they recognize it and are changing as we speak, and I think that is exhibited in the fact that last year they took a 17-year-old kid from Puerto Rico who is totally against type of all the players they've picked over the previous 5 years. A toolsy, raw, athletic, unpolished, going to take some time to get to the big leagues type player, and immediately that kid, whose name is Elliot Ramos, he's a long way from the big leagues, no sure thing, but immediately that player was recognized as the Giants' most promising young player and the guy that everybody asked for in a trade, and it was a huge success. That is a home run draft pick. Even if he doesn't make the major leagues, he's got major value right now because of the way he performed and the upside, and I think they did that deliberately. It shocked a lot of people when they took him because it was so against type. There were many players that sort of fit the exact stereotypical Giants type when they picked, and they passed those guys up to take this guy, and it was a huge immediate success, and I think you're going to see more and more of that. That means more swings and misses probably, and that means more, just sort of total busts, but I think they are going to make more upside plays, and it all fits into that same parameter. It's like the game has changed so much now of the home run, the strikeout, the value of the power, the dynamism, with the lessening of the value of sort of the solid contact player that the Giants favored for so long. And I think they are making a change organizationally.
Dave, what happens if they're sub 500 this season, and we can see it possibly. I've been kind of surprised by some of the projections that say they could be a wild card team. I mean, obviously it's possible. I've been a little surprised by that. But if this isn't a dramatic turnaround, I mean, are we looking at the last year for Bruce Bochy? Is Brian Sabian someone maybe that could say, okay, that's enough for me? Or are we looking at the potential end of an era coming up right here?
I think there are two parts of that question. Number one, I think it is at least possible, although both Brian and Bochy are relatively young and energetic still and have that competitive spirit still, I think it's at least possible that if the Giants make a push here this year and it doesn't work out, this is still a team that has a lot of work to do, and then they decide, okay, all right, we gave it one more run, now it's time to really do something different, and whether that's a tear down or just a whole reboot, whatever it is, I think it is possible that Brian and Bruce would say, with all we've accomplished, with all we've been through, that's not for us. That's not where we are in our careers, and you need somebody else in here to do that. I have a hard time believing that Bruce Bochy is going to lose his job, because of some, a win-loss record. Everybody knows what a tremendous manager he is, and that what has happened here in the last year with the Giants is not on him. And so that, I think it would be more from their perspective than from, say, ownership saying those guys got to go. I have a hard time seeing that happening.
It's one more Giants question. Just the one out in the distance is Madison Bumgarner. We know he's under contract for 2 more years, but the pressure starts to build, right, as you get closer to the end of the contract. Either you extend him or you have to think about maybe moving him. Where do you think the Giants are right there? Are they just going to wait till next year and make a decision there?
If we play a little hypothetical game, I believe strongly if the Giants had cleaned house and hired a Andrew Friedman, Theo Epstein type to come in and run this franchise. Let's say that had happened, which obviously it didn't, and I'm not saying it should have happened, but if that had happened, I believe the first thing that would have happened was the exploration of Bumgarner being traded. He is the most valuable asset the Giants have. You could get a huge return for him with 2 more full seasons, 2 more postseasons to a contending Yankees-type team. I believe that the first thing that an outsider would have done is pursue that. Well, whether it would have happened or not, I think that would have been immediately on the table. And I just don't think that's part of the Giants' DNA, and I don't believe that's part of this current leadership's DNA. That's not what they believe in, and I don't blame them. I absolutely love the fact that the Giants almost stand alone in professional sports these days in their loyalty to their players. And I think that sometimes it does hurt them. I think sometimes it hurts the bottom line wins and losses, how loyal they are. But I still approve. I mean, I still think it's part of why this franchise is as strong and healthy as it is. It's part of the reason why people have particularly loved rooting for this Giants team over the last decade. That's a part of who the Giants are. And if it's not always perfect, I think I'm willing to live with that. But the cold reality is that if somebody else were running this franchise, that would have been on the table this winter.
And then you get to next year, and he's not signed the extension, I mean. Do they have to think about it?
That is a different question. I mean, I think the Giants are going to be they're going to be very aggressive in trying to bring him back long term. I think Bumgarner loves it here. He loves the Giants franchise. He loves the city, the fans. It's almost like Buster in a way, in that you take a guy who grew up so far from here in a place so different from here, and yet it's been the perfect fit for them professionally. I think Bumgarner wants to be here, but I don't think I think there is an edginess with when you change agents and the contract he signed, which he signed it. I've never one time, not once, ever heard him complain about it, or I've never heard of anybody else saying, hey, he complained to me about it. But I guarantee you the agent is in his ear saying how underpaid he's been all these years, and that there are not going to be any discounts coming, I don't think, is the point. And so whether that means the Giants can get it done or not, or decide it's smart to get it done, but I don't think he's given any sort of concessions to the Giants when it's time.
No, and he's read it enough about what a team-friendly deal that was. I can imagine that. Hey, I skipped over it last time. We got to get to it. I want to make sure we get to it. You and I both know Jim Harbaugh from previous iterations of Harbaugh, but if you know him, you know him, and have had experiences with him. What do you make of what's happened with him in Ann Arbor or with Michigan? Clearly wasn't a great year this season. Do you think he's got a couple more years in Michigan? Do you think he's looking at the NFL? Where do you think his mind is right now? Just in his, still a relatively young man, still got a lot he could do in football and beyond that.
He really. I wonder whether maybe the fact that they didn't play as well this year as he was hoping, as everybody was hoping. I wonder whether that's playing into the idea of him sticking around, because maybe you're different than I am. I did not hear one time his name tossed around. I go to Big Ten country a lot. I'm in Indianapolis a lot. I have particular affinity for that franchise because I know and care a lot about Andrew Luck, and I'm a fan of the Colts because of Andrew. And I just always thought that was Jim's landing spot in the NFL. I just always thought Andrew's there. He played for the Colts, won an MVP with the Colts. It was just too perfect of a match. And the fact that job is open and he wasn't even really, I don't think, expressed any interest in the job, tells me he's probably going to be in Ann Arbor for a while now. The thing that's happened that is really, because Jim is you and I both know, Jim is a great elite football coach. He's one of the best football coaches in the sport. He's on the level, I think, maybe it's hard to say Belichick and Saban, maybe those two guys are at a different tier, but whoever comes next, he's in that mix. And the thing that has been surprising is the lack of quarterback development. And, Jim's been a good quarterback talent evaluator, developer. He got the most out of Alex Smith. He got the most out of Colin Kaepernick. He got a ton out of the Stanford players that he had, especially Luck. I've been surprised that they haven't had more success at Michigan. And, you look back on the Niners and the Stanford experience, and you do maybe I wonder whether the staff issues that he's got now, whether, he's got the same kind of support that he had. The coaching staffs he had at Stanford and with the Niners were just awesome. And I think we maybe as a group we underappreciated his ability to find coaching talent to be with him, to have talented guys around him. And right now it seems to me there's a little bit of a void there, and maybe that's part of what's going on. But I think he's in Ann Arbor for a while, and he has a burning desire to win big there. He's won big everywhere else, even if he's not won championships. And I think he wants to do that at Michigan.
Yeah, I think he's circled the national playoff championship game at Levi's Stadium in January 2019. I think he might have circled that like 3.5 years ago.
That's a good point. He may have, and maybe he's got the Ole Miss quarterback coming in, who's supremely talented. He is erratic. Like he's one of those guys who's going to win you a lot of games. He might lose you one or two, which in college football is iffy proposition because one loss can cost you the chance to get there. But maybe that'll be the missing piece for him. He's got a ton of defensive talent coming back, and he's got the best hire by far he's made in Michigan is the defensive coordinator, who's tremendous. So maybe the defense and a playmaker at quarterback, and maybe he can get there.
Yeah, I've always heard that this season was the one to circle, that 4 seasons of Harbaugh would be what you look at, and he's kind of gone 4-4-4 at different places, and we'll see. I don't know if I'd say a lot of years for him at Michigan. Who knows? He could do it. But, man, I always looked at this season, even when he started out so fast, and it went faster there than I think anyone expected, maybe except for him. But I always thought this is where the program was going to kind of unfold to get his guys in there. And the quarterback situation has been, you're so correct, has just been not good for him. But, you get the quarterback in there, and maybe you take the big run at it, and then maybe you see after this season. Maybe after this season is the one where you start looking. Because NFL people think he's coming back. I'm sure you've heard that, David. NFL people think he's coming back. Doesn't mean he's going to, but they do think he's coming back.
And I have always thought that. I have always thought, and I was number one on the list. I know Michigan people still hold you close to their heart, too. But
yes, they do.
I never thought he would go back to college. I thought that desire, never was probably the wrong word, but certainly when he did, I thought if he was going to jump or needed to get out of here, he was going to another NFL franchise. And I guess the thing that holds me back is I just always thought the Colts with luck would be his number one choice of franchises circled, and the fact that job has come open. And maybe you're right. It's unfinished business, and he had sort of a big picture plan, and it gives me a little pause that we didn't hear anything about his interest in that job. Nothing about even considering it or maybe going in for a chat or something. That is the one thing that kind of makes me think, who knows, maybe something's a little different this time.
Yep, sounds right. Hey, I got to finish up with, I know you're a candidate for the ESPN Sunday Night Baseball job. You certainly have done everything that would make you a huge candidate for that. Have you heard any other indications? Is it something that they have talked to you about, saying, okay, you're one of 2 or one of 3 finalists for this really prestigious job?
Yeah, they have talked to me about it, and they've given me a little specifics about it. In the end, I don't believe, and I don't know how close they are. The season's starting soon, so at some point they got to make a decision. Ultimately, I don't think they're going to choose me, not necessarily because I believe I could do the job and do it well, and I've told them that I'd love to do it. I don't think it's going to be me, which is okay. But yeah, I've been considered, and they've been really good to me with their baseball coverage. I probably told you this before, but it's been a funny thing the last few years doing more and more big league baseball for them. Even as network regular season baseball television becomes less impactful than it used to be, Sunday Night Baseball is not quite what it used to be, just with the incredible saturation of local games and local broadcasts, and you can consume baseball in so many different ways. It's just, it's hard for any regular season national baseball to resonate the way that it did when there were so many fewer ways to watch the sport. Even so, I have so enjoyed the last few years. It's just such a different perspective than doing my Giants games, which I love for a totally different way, but I get to interact with other managers, other franchises. You see players in a different light. It's maybe a better Giants broadcaster to go out and do all these games. I feel like I'm collecting information every time I go out and
do they look,
do a game.
Do they look at you as a Giants guy, by the way? I was curious about that.
Yeah, they're most are pretty good about that. I can remember the Padres manager when Andy Green, when he first got hired, he was very reluctant to talk to me. Like I think for him it really was like I'm giving away secrets here. I can't talk about my players to this guy. And last year he was a little looser. Guys like Bud Black and Dave Roberts that I know that are friends that are in the division, they have no problem treating me like just a professional. They're not hiding stuff from me. Maybe every once in a while they're planning some info on me, hoping that I pass it along. But I do try to make that separation. I mean, it happens in college football too. Coaches know that I went to Stanford, have a relationship with David Shaw. If I do games where Stanford's playing or Stanford's opponents, coaches are pretty good about that. I think they trust us and know we separate those things.
They know that you only really care about like getting onto the right golf course and having the perfect swing on the tee box. So that's where your passion is. You just anything that could lead you to that. I think I would never trust you on that part. I'll put it that way. I'll trust you on everything else.
I need a putting lesson. I'm the off season. I'm playing golf and enjoying it, and I cannot make a putt, and it's frustrating.
That I just had that at Cordoval where I missed. You can't have missed 3-3-footers like I did though. You never have done that on a round.
Maybe not 3, but miss 1 and miss a lot of 5 and 6 and 7. It's just sloppy golf. You feel like you're playing well. Golf is such a funny sport that way, and when you watch the guys at the highest level, it gets emphasized too, where you do everything brilliantly. You're this incredible talent. I'm not putting myself in that category, but when you watch Dustin Johnson when he doesn't win a tournament, like he's hitting the ball so beautifully, and then it all gets wasted because you're standing there with 6 feet away and you can't get the ball in the hole. And it's just there are other sports where a small aspect of the game can overtake bigger aspects, but I don't think there's any sport quite like golf where that one little thing can erase all the other good stuff you do.
Yep. Okay, I've asked you before your favorite restaurant. I remember that, so we'll skip over that one this one time, unless you want to give out a super plug. But because you're Dave Flemming, because I've been on the golf course with you, and I know you've played some of the best courses in the world. Dave Flemming, what's your favorite golf course?
Yeah, I am such a golf snob. I will say, of all I love so many of them. But of the out-of-town, non-Northern California, we're spoiled here. The place where I have my only hole-in-one is Marion, and Marion might be my favorite golf course anyway. It's just a wonderful place. But the fact that I have a hole-in-one there, it's hard for me to say anything other than that one.
Give us the club, the distance, the hole.
Well, it's the little. Have you ever played Marion?
No, I have not played Marion.
Your listeners who are golf fans, most famously recently, it was the hole that Phil Mickelson bogeyed. It's a 120-yard hole. It's a tiny little short par 3 right as you drive in the main entrance. And then when Mickelson was in contention, when the Open was there a few years ago, he had a sand wedge and made a 4. And I had a pitching wedge and made a 1. So sorry, Phil. It is a wonderful.
You're just that much better than Mickelson, so that's all right.
The only problem with that hole-in-one is because there's this giant famous bunker with all these grasses at the top. You can't see the ball go in the hole.
Oh no!
So I didn't know if there. I thought I knew I hit it really well, and I walked up to the green and I didn't see the ball, and I was about to get mad that I'd used the wrong club and hit it in the back bunker, and walked up and the ball was in the hole.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And that was, but that true story, that happened the morning of Game 1 of the 2010 National League Championship Series. That night, Cody Ross hit 2 home runs against Roy Halladay and the Giants won Game 1.
Every time you get a hole-in-one, Cody Ross hits 2 home runs in
the
NLCS.
playoffs.
Yeah,
that's true.
It's pretty
that
much
has held up.
All right, David, listen, I appreciate it. We do have to get on the course sometime again, and you can take some more of my money. By the way, draining a putt on
sounds good to me.
draining a
like
putt on
idea
18 on me. I remember this very clearly. So we will do that. And David, as always, great to have you on. And I'm sure. By the way, Dave Flemming, one of the people who I have hoped to get to write for The Athletic, who could not, but I still hope this down the road. David Flemming columns in The Athletic. This is one of the things.
Seems like you have just about everybody else, and I will say congratulations. I know you all have been working really hard, but it's an awesome product. You all should be really proud of the stuff you're pumping out every single day.
Really appreciate it, David.
Become essential for all of us who care about Bay Area sports, but it's not just that. It's the global stuff.
Going hard on baseball too, by the way. You know, they're hiring a bunch of new baseball writers across the country. This is going to be fantastic. But that's really nice.
Right now, I feel like between Rosenthal and Jim Bowden, who I think is a fount of information, and the local people like Eno and Ali Andy and ton of good baseball stuff.
Yep. All right, David. Well, that's great to hear. Great to talk to you. And I'll see you soon.
Okay, great. Can't wait.
Everybody, Dave Flemming. Thanks, everybody. That's the show.